Verse 92. When those who are born of the Buddha see that the world is no more than mind itself, they will obtain a body of transformation, which has nothing to do with effect-producing works, but which is endowed with the powers, psychic faculties, and self-control. So, born of the Buddha. This means that you've touched realization. Your goal is quite clear. You're not vaguely pursuing something or looking for something. You found something and you want to remain established in it. This is the Bodhisattva, spiritual or enlightenment practitioner, described here as being born of the Buddha. They see that the world is no more than mind itself, and here mind is with a capital M. We've gone beyond, or we're no longer caught up in what in the previous verse was described as the discriminations. Verse 86 spoke about how our ordinary mind is a discriminating mind. And verse 91 was pointing out how this discriminating mind still works, even when it's clothed in the language of spirituality, the language of liberation. But we're not getting caught up in that anymore. The spiritual practitioner has the wherewithal to come back to the true nature of mind, which could also be described as consciousness or awareness, best spelt with capital letters. Now, we're told in verse 92 that in doing so, the spiritual practitioner will obtain a body of transformation, which has nothing to do with effect-producing works, but which is endowed with the powers, psychic faculties, and self-control. Well, I'm not going to talk about the powers and psychic faculties because I've spoken about this often enough in the past. Most recently in video 55, which is entitled On Becoming a Spiritual Superhero, this covered verse 68, which also spoke about the will body, the psychic faculties, and self-mastery and various powers belonging to the mind, with a capital M. But let's focus on this body of transformation. It's the body of realization. And it sounds wonderful, doesn't it? It sounds wonderful if I could only get this body of transformation with all its superpowers. In doing these videos, I don't want to just be talking about my thoughts or my ideas about these things. What I would be asking if I were you listening to this is, well, Guru Gillis, what about your body of transformation? For me, these teachings are only real if they can be put into practice. And I feel that I can sincerely speak about this body of transformation, but the context is one of a great deal of suffering. I've been going through quite a difficult time. A lot of it centered around finding a job. And I was very grateful to receive a night job a few months back, which was very challenging for me, not simply because it was a night job, but because it was right outside my comfort zone. The whole job was outside my comfort zone. And it was a very powerful experience, actually, very powerful and very rewarding from a spiritual point of view. It was a great opportunity to put the teachings into practice. And it was a very intense experience, and probably still is to some extent. I felt myself being peeled right back to the core, right back to the basic pain of my youth. I'm not going to go into the story of my childhood. Such stories are very fascinating for certain people who believe that all our troubles stem from our childhood and our upbringing, and we can lay the blame firmly at the doorstep of our parents. I kind of find that quite a superficial thing. It might be useful up to a certain point, but what I was finding out, what I was experiencing, was it wasn't about my childhood. It's much more fundamental than that. It's about that peculiar and unique combination of DNA as represented by my mother and father and by the generations which preceded them. This is my karmic inheritance. I'm a product of my parents' DNA. And DNA isn't just about body, it's about your whole psychological disposition. And I think both my parents had a very difficult psychological disposition, which they in turn have inherited from their ancestors. I don't want to go into too much detail, but I don't want to be too general either. I think I could sum up my father's psychological disposition as one of insecurity and sensitivity, whereas my mother's disposition, which is quite clear in a memoir that she wrote, was one of rage against the world, basically. So this is a combination of two opposites which could never work out, and didn't work out in my parents' case. And now I have their inheritance within this one psychology. So it's no exaggeration when I've mentioned in previous occasions about the disaster that constitutes my personal psychology. It's a very painful state of affairs. I doubt that I am particularly unique in this. I suspect that most people's personal psychology is a very painful state of affairs. And we get through life by developing various coping mechanisms. My father's was alcohol and cigarettes. I'm not quite sure what mine is. I'm not predisposed to alcoholism. But whatever it is, this recent nighttime job, peeled me right back to this basic pain. I wonder what effect my story's having on you. Maybe it sounds quite dramatic, quite fascinating. And this is the problem, getting sucked into the drama. But I'm doing these videos. These videos are promising an alternative, described here as the body of transformation. this body is the alternative to getting sucked into the drama. So I could see this pain, this raw edge, and I could observe it without feeling I have to take refuge in something. I was actually facing up to this pain, this pain that I felt in my youth. I was actually addressing it properly for the first time. And there's nothing that can be done about it. It's there. You know, it's like being an amputee. Once you're an amputee, that's it. You have to deal with it. There's lots of ways you can cope with it. Nowadays you can get these wonderful prosthetic limbs which can make you run faster than people with their original legs. But there's still the psychological aspect. So some pain cannot be healed. But a transformation can still take place in terms of our relationship with that pain. And this transformation is fueled by enlightenment practice. And this body of transformation is described here as being endowed with the powers, psychic faculties, and self-control. Well, like I said, I'm not going into the details of the psychic faculties and powers, but the self-control is about remaining in that transformation body and not getting caught up in the drama of whatever pain is going on. This is the real empowerment. This is the real power. It's worth pointing out here that these powers and psychic faculties have nothing to do with effect-producing works. So these powers have actually no effect. They're not something you can activate in the world of conventional understanding. Although, strictly speaking, I suspect the meaning is that these powers do not have karmic consequences. But that just reinforces the point, really. These powers are not powers that are operating in conventional reality. They're operating in the transformation body. This is actually the core of the Buddha's teaching, which begins with suffering. It gives us the option to step out of that suffering. And then there's the work of remaining established in that opportunity, remaining established and realizing that opportunity, realizing what that opportunity allows.